Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 105b. And last four words on 105a were Basar Debai Hadar Pashta. After Abba Bar Shmuel raised the dilemma, then he resolved it. Now we're on top of 105b with the words Mechusar Kriva Lav Kimechusar Masedami. Even if the carcass of a kosher bird has not yet been brought close to being swallowed, it is still not considered as if a necessary action has not yet been performed, and an olive bulk is sufficient to transmit impurity to food and drink. Esvei Shloisha Sodvarim Nemo Nevila Sofer וזה אחד מהן, צריך המחשבה ואין צריך ההכשר, ומטעם תום הזויך לגבי עצם אליו, Rabbi Meri. Rabbi Chia bar Abba raised an objection to Rabbi Abba bar Shmuel based on a Mishnah in Taharot 1:1. 13 matters were stated with regard to the carcass of a kosher bird, and this is one of them. In order to be susceptible to impurity as a food, it requires a person's intention that it be eaten, and it does not need to be rendered susceptible to such impurity by contact with liquid, and it transmits ritual impurity of food in the amount of an egg bulk. In accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? What, is it not the opinion of Rabbi Meir? If so, he holds that an egg bulk of a carcass of a kosher bird is necessary to transmit impurity. Lo, Rabbanani, the Gemara responds, no, the Mishnah is the opinion of the rabbis. Rabbi Meir the Gemara challenges, but the first clause of the Mishnah teaches, in order to be susceptible to impurity as food, it requires a person's intention that it be eaten, and it does not need to be rendered susceptible by contact with liquid. And from whom do you learn this reasoning? Rabbi Meir, as was taught in the Braita 158. And since the first clause is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, it follows that the latter clause is also the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Gemara responds, are these cases comparable? Must both clauses be the opinion of the same Tana? This case is as it is, and that case is as it is. They're two different cases. The Gemara challenges, but one can still infer this from the fact that the latter clause of the Mishnah teaches the slaughter or the pinching of the nape of a bird offering purifies it from its impurity, meaning prevents it from assuming the impure status of a carcass, even if it is found to have a wound that would have caused it to die within 12 months. And from whom did you learn this reasoning? From Rabbi Meir, C67a. Could it be that the first clause and the last clause represent the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and the middle clause represents the opinion of the rabbis? In Reisha V'Sefer Rabbi Meir, Metzias Rabbanan. The Gemara responds, yes. The first clause and the last clause represent the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and the middle clause represents the opinion of the rabbis. Amar le Rav Hamanuna l'Vezera Lo tetev akrach ad yamnet li milsa nivlasov toer Rabbi Meir Monila Rishon Mesheni o ein Moinin Rishon Mesheni. Rabbi Hamanuna said to Rabbi Zera, do not sit down until you tell me the resolution of this matter. In general, when a food touches a primary source of ritual impurity after having been rendered susceptible to impurity by contact with a liquid, it contracts first-degree impurity. If it then touches another food, it imparts it to second-degree impurity. The carcass of a kosher bird, according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, transmits impurity to food without being rendered susceptible. Does one count its first and second degrees of impurity when it touches food or drink, treating it like a primary source of impurity? Or perhaps one does not count first and second degrees of impurity, but rather treats it as a food with first degree impurity, which imparts second degree impurity. Amar le kol echad tame adam b'maga monin bo rishon v'sheni kol echad mitame adam b'maga ein monin bo rishon v'sheni. Rabbi Zera said to him, wherever an item can render a person impure through contact, it is considered a primary source of impurity, and one counts its first and second degrees of impurity. And wherever it cannot render a person impure through contact, one does not count its first and second degrees of impurity. Since the carcass of a kosher bird does not render a person impure through contact, but only by being swallowed, it is treated as a food with first degree impurity. V'yamri le Rabbi Avin bar Kahana hadetnan chibur ochlin ad al yedei mashkin chibur tuma kalo pen chibur tuma chamura. Rabbi Zera posed a dilemma to Rabbi Ami bar Chia, and some say to Rabbi Avin bar Kahana, concerning that which we learned in the Mishnah in Torah 8:8. Connections between foods by liquid, meaning liquids in contact with two foods, a situation that causes the impurity of one food to be transmitted to the other and their sizes to be combined toward the minimum measure for transmitting impurity, are considered a connection for the lenient impurity of foods, but are not considered a connection for impurity severe enough to be transmitted to a human being. Okay. Where were we? Rabbi Zera asked if two pieces of an animal carcass, was that it? You know what, let's go back to, I know I read this, but I'll read it again. Every time I take a break, sometimes I lose my place, I just gotta go back over it. So Rabbi Zera posed a dilemma to Rabbi Ami bar Chia, and some say to Rabbi Avin bar Kahana, concerning that which we learned in the Mishnah in Torah 8:8, connections between foods by liquid, meaning liquids in contact with two foods, a situation that causes the impurity of one food to be transmitted to the other and sizes to be combined toward the minimum measure for transmitting impurity, are considered a connection for the lenient impurity of foods, but are not considered a connection for impurity severe enough to be transmitted to a human being. If two pieces of animal carcass are connected by a liquid, they do not combine to form the minimum measure for transmitting their impurity to a person, but they can transmit impurity to food. Monin bo rishon d'sheni o ein monin bo rishon d'sheni. Rabbi Zera asks, if these two pieces of animal carcass come in contact with food, does one count its first and second degrees of impurity and treat the pieces as a primary source of impurity, such that the food will impart second degree impurity to other food, or does one not count its first and second degrees of impurity and treat the animal carcass as food with first degree impurity? Amar le kol echad mitame adam moinin bo rishon v'sheni ein mitame adam moinin bo rishon v'sheni. Rabbi Zera said to him, I don't get this. Rabbi Zera asks, and how is it that Rabbi Zera said to him? I think they made a mistake here. Maybe they said to Rabbi Zera, whenever an item can render a person impure, one counts it first and second degrees of impurity, and wherever it cannot render a person impure, one does not count its first and second degrees of impurity. Since the pieces of the carcass cannot transmit their impurity to a person, they are treated as food with first degree impurity. Yatsu elu ve'elu minahani mili tanavan lahanan hoimel חוץ לשלוש מחנות, כאן למחנה אחת לא מלך, כיוון שעשר חוץ למחנה אחד מטעם בגודי. The Mishnah teaches, when both these priests and those priests emerged, all of their garments were rendered richly impure. The Gemara explains from where are these matters derived. As the sages taught in the Braita, the verse states with regard to the bull and goat that are burned on Yom Kippur, they shall be carried forth outside the camp. Leviticus 16:27. There, elsewhere, the verse states that such bulls and goats are burned outside 3 camps. Those are the tabernacle, the Levites, and the Israelites. Whereas here, the verse states only that they are taken outside 1 camp, meaning the tabernacle. This serves to tell you, once the offering emerges beyond the camp, one who carries it renders his garments impure, as the next verse states, and he who burns them shall wash his garments. Leviticus 16:28. והיגו ומנהלה נתנה רבנן ויעש כל הפעם מחוץ למחנה חוץ לשלוש מחנוס. אתה אומר חוץ לשלוש מחנוס או אינו אלא מחנה אחס. The Gemara explains further, and from where do we derive that halacha itself, that the bulls and goats are burned outside the 3 camps? As the sages taught in the Braita, it is stated about the bull brought as a sin offering of the high priest, even the whole bull he shall carry outside the camp unto a pure place where the ashes are poured out and burn it. Leviticus 4:12, meaning that he should take it outside the 3 camps. Do you say that he takes it outside the 3 camps, or is he required to take it outside only 1 camp? כשהוא אומר בפרעידו מחוץ למחנה שאין צורך לומר שכבר נאמר כאשר סרב וספר הראשון ייתן לו מחנה שניות. When the verse states with regard to the bull brought as a communal sin offering, he shall carry the bull outside the camp and burn it as he burnt the first bull. Leviticus 4:21. It requires explanation, as there is no need for the verse to state outside the camp, since it is already stated at the end of the same verse, and burn it as he burned the first bull, which indicates that all the halachot of the bull brought as a sin offering of a high priest apply to the bull brought as a communal sin offering. What then does the verse mean when it states outside the camp? To give it a second camp, meaning it indicates that it must be removed not only from the camp of the divine presence corresponding to the temple, but also from the Levite camp corresponding to the temple mount. כשהוא אומר מחוץ למחנה בדשן שאין צורך לומר שכבר נאמר על שבח הדשן יישרף ליתן לו מחנה שלישיס. And when another verse states with regard to the removal of the ash, he shall put off his garments, and put on other garments and carry forth the ashes outside the camp to a pure place. Leviticus 6:4. That verse also requires an explanation, as there is no need for the verse to state this, since it is already stated with regard to the bull brought as a sin offering of high priest. Even the whole bull shall he carry outside the camp to a pure place where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire, whereas the ashes are poured out shall it be burned. Leviticus 4:12. The repetition outside the camp indicates that he is required to give it a 3rd camp, meaning teaching that it is burned when outside the Israelite camp corresponding to the land outside the walls of Jerusalem. Rabbi Shimon michutz lemachane ma'avid le midbar lechem Netanya. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ne'emar kan chutz lemachane v'ne'emar lehalan chutz lemachane ma lehalan chutz לשלוש מחנות אף כאן חוץ לשלוש מחנות ומה להלן למזרחה של ירושלים. The Gemara asks, and what does Rabbi Shimon do with this phrase stated with regard to the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur outside the camp? Leviticus 16:27. Given that he holds that the garments do not become impure until the offering is burning, the Gemara answers he requires it for that which is taught in the Braita. Rabbi Eliezer says it is stated here outside the camp, and it is stated there with regard to the red heifer, he shall bring it outside the camp. Numbers 19 verse 3. Just as here the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur are burned outside 3 camps, so too there the red heifer is burned outside 3 camps. And just as there the red heifer is burned east of Jerusalem, since it must be burned toward the front of the tent of meeting, Numbers 19:4, opposite the entrance of the temple. Of the temple, which is the east, also there. To be continued. I'll probably start from this, hopefully, next time, just to get the context.